Hello, this is Soundout here, and today I'll be reviewing every movie I watched in 2021, Part 2, July through December. And we're doing it different this time.
It's morphin' time!
So, about 6 months ago, I put out a video called Reviewing Every Movie I Watched in 2021 Part 1, which covered January through June. I talked about every movie I've watched this year, which has included a lot of movie marathons, so as you can imagine, it was lengthy. In fact, that video was about an hour, and I felt like that is too long, and I am not doing that again. So for Part 2, I decided to try something different, and I really want to know what you guys think because, well, this is going to be a little different. Instead of talking about each movie, for a minute or two each, I'm going to review every movie in one sentence. I have not planned this out. I have not rewritten this. I have not pre-scripted this. This is going to be off-the-cuff, one-sentence reviews, and I hope it goes well. Now, if you want to hear deeper thoughts on these movies, I have done a couple recent tier list videos, as well as the top 12 movies of the year, and you can check those out on my channel, as well as the playlist Soundout Discusses Movies, and several cards and other links that will appear around the videos in the typical YouTube marketing fashion. So on that note, we're going to be reviewing these movies in one sentence. And if you want to know more about any of these movies here that I didn't cover in another video, leave a comment and I'd be glad to give you a short little essay. So, let's begin. July 4th, I watched Kamen Rider Super 1, 8 Riders vs. Galaxy King. The worst Kamen Rider movie in the sense that it has no heart, emotion, or meaning. Next up, Gundam Hathaway with the English dub. A solid dub that conveys the emotions and the characters and presents the story in an easier to digest format for English language speakers. The Music Man, a classic film for a specific holiday about a man who swindles a whole town but is likable anyways, in addition to classic music. Some of these sentences may have semicolons. July 6th, I watched Scott Pilgrim vs. the World on 4K. A wonderfully classic movie that should have reunited cinema, but it may have been too early. On July 9th, Ultraman Tiga, The Final Odyssey. A film that perfectly epilogues the Ultraman Tiga series while adding lore, mythology, and extra character work to make the experience worthwhile. July 11th, I watched Black Widow on Disney+. A film that for some reason fails to capture the instant spirit of the character and therefore ends up becoming a convoluted mess. July 13th, I watched Cruella again, a beautifully encapturing world of a film that I could not wait to revisit. July 15th, I watched a commentary track for An American Werewolf in London. That's a commentary track, we're going to skip over that one. July 16th, Teen Titans Go See Space Jam. Well, that's one way to revisit Space Jam. Also, Star Trek First Contact, a wonderfully dramatic film encapsulating so many of the greatest things about the Star Trek franchise of the 90s. July 18th, Space Jam: A New Legacy. Boy, Warner Brothers sure owns a lot. July 19th, G.I. Joe Retaliation in 4K. A wonderful action piece that captures the spirit of G.I. Joe, even with a few missteps. The mountain sequence is beautiful. I also rewatched Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey for its anniversary. A sequel to a classic film that does not retread the original, but instead goes in a new direction. July 24th, I went and saw Snake Eyes, G.I. Joe Origins. A film that manages to put well-choreographed action sequences with really poor camera work to overall give a new start to a universe without actually featuring its main character. If you've seen it, you know what I mean. I also watched Transformers the movie on its new 4K. A classic animated film that simultaneously destroys your childhood while creating a new one. On July 25th, I watched Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom on its 4K release. A sequel to a film that may not be as good, but I'm always impressed by its practical effects and its storytelling. July 27th, Kikai Sentai Zenkaiger Red Battle All Sentai Gathering. Overall, a film that is not too heavy on story, but is heavy on fun, and I can appreciate that. July 31st, I went and saw Jungle Cruise. Jungle Cruise is an old-school adventure film returning to a classic time and doing it quite well. And then also, we watched Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, now in its 4K. The third film that may not be as best as the other two per far, but is the most fun of the entire trilogy. On August 1st, we rewatched Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Revisiting this movie made me realize that it's not a terrible film, it just doesn't live up to the previous trilogy. August 7th, we watched Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing is an 80s classic monster film that captures the spirit of the character as well as the spirit of the era of cinema. August 8th, The Suicide Squad, watched it on HBO Max. A film that didn't work for me, but may work for others, and it's overall well made. August 9th was my birthday, so I rewatched some classic films for me, some of my favorites, including Batman Beyond Return of the Joker, a very dark but yet very entertaining film that brings back a classic Batman character into the future. I also watched Justice League Doom, a perfect encapsulation of the best Justice League stories boiled down to a nice 80-minute movie. And Tron Legacy, a sequel that doesn't try to live up to its original, but instead supersede it by creating a new form of art, just like the previous Tron film had in the 80s. August 10th, Batman The Long Halloween Part 2, a satisfying finale to the Long Halloween adaptation that overall made me enjoy it more than the original comic. DC Showcase Blue Beetle, a wonderful throwback to 60s animation that made me wish a Blue Beetle cartoon existed this entire time. August 14th, we watched Brigadoon. Brigadoon is a classic musical that happens to capture really wide set pieces in an impressive manner. August 16th, we watched The Return of Swamp Thing, a film that, while to many may be terrible, is actually probably amazing. A B film at its best. August 18th, Kamen Rider Super 1, the movie. Not a great movie, but overall more solid than 8 Riders vs. Galaxy King, which isn't saying much. August 19th, The North Avenue Irregulars, an offbeat comedy of sorts that brings me a lot of questions into its story formatting, but overall I don't regret it. August 21st, Lupin III, The Castle of Cagliostro in 4K. A classic Lupin adventure directed by one of the anime's best directors has come together in the most beautiful presentation possible. August 22nd, Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home in theaters. This one is known as the one with the whales, but it should be known as the one with the best comedy. August 23rd, I rewatched the live-action Scooby-Doo just on a whim. A movie that surprisingly holds up well despite some dated humor. I actually quite enjoyed seeing it again. August 28th, Luca. Luca is a classically charming Pixar film that won't break your heart, but will certainly make you feel emotions. Also on that day, I rewatched the first Gundam Reconquista in G movie. It's amazing how less runtime and better story structure makes for a better presentation. August 29th, I watched Gundam Reconquista in G Movie 2. Continuing forward, same story, second verse. We also watched the Lupin TV special, which is long enough to be considered a movie in my eyes, Lupin III, Missed by a Dollar. A fun adventure talking about gambling, lottery, and overall just avoiding death in the best way that Lupin knows how. September 2nd, Mortal Kombat Legends Battle of the Realms. The second animated Mortal Kombat movie may not have been as striking as the first, but was still a worthwhile addition. Side note, why does this year hate Kung Lao? If you know what I mean, you know what I mean. September 4th, 1984's Dune. A good adaptation, although really weirdly paced. I do not regret seeing the original Dune. September 5th, we went out and saw Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. An MCU origin story that takes different paths and has the best fight sequences that the universe has ever seen. Also rewatched Naruto Ninja Clash in the Land of Snow, a classic shonen anime film that has some surprisingly beautifully animated moments in it. September 6th, we rewatched The Princess Bride. The Princess Bride is a comedy, an adventure, a fantasy, and also just an 80s bedtime story. It's incredible. Also that same day, rewatched Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. One of the classic animated films, still holds up to this day, and has its surprisingly dark moments, which I appreciate. September 12th, The Princess and the Frog. Revisiting a great movie with a great score, Keith David still plays one of the best Disney villains ever. September 13th, Scooby-Doo meets Courage the Cowardly Dog. A true sequel/epilogue to Courage the Cowardly Dog that also features some great moments with the Scooby Gang. September 17th, rewatched Pinocchio. Pinocchio may be a classic Disney film, but it is darker than anything you could ever imagine. If you haven't revisited it since childhood, I recommend it. You'll be traumatized. September 18th, we watched Young Frankenstein. Young Frankenstein is a parody, a spoof, but also kind of a great adaptation of the Frankenstein story. September 20th, The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. Now this is known as a classic duology of film, but I think that each part could stand on its own. September 25th, we watched 1999's The Mummy. A classic style adventure film that we do not get enough of these days. If you haven't revisited, I totally recommend it. September 26th, The Mummy returns. Building on the success of the first film, this sequel takes us to new and exciting places, while also bringing up weird reincarnation plots that I weren't sure were necessary. October 9th, The Muppets Haunted Mansion. This may be the greatest thing the Muppets have done since the ABC Muppet series, and it wonderfully encapsulates the wonder and magic of the Haunted Mansion. October 10th, Creature from the Black Lagoon. A surprisingly well-made film that I think gets sidelined only because of the lack of notoriety, but it is one worth checking out because there is some interesting man versus monster storytelling. October 11th, 1923's The Hunchback of Notre Dame. A grand, sprawling, epic silent film that even non-silent film fans will likely enjoy. October 12th, 1941's The Wolfman. A classic werewolf story that brings in heart, emotion, and pain while also having very impressive visual effects for its time. Also that same day, Daimajin. The story of a village using a giant stone statue to solve all their petty debts. October 13th, Return of Daimajin. More of that pettiness, but more of that war stories, and more of that statue. October 13th, Wrath of Daimajin. What if the kids send the giant stone statue to destroy the opposite village? October 14th, Venom Let There Be Carnage. A more hardcore PG-13 than we've seen in a long while. I appreciated the actor performances and the story all coming together in a nice little bundle. Also, Star Trek The Motion Picture, now in 4K. While the theatrical version may be inferior to the director's cut, just remember, it was all the studio's fault. October 16th, The Batman vs. Dracula. Pairing one of the most gothic interpretations of Batman with the Lord of all Vampires Dracula makes for one of the most exciting DC animated films ever created. Also, Beetlejuice, now on 4K. What is kind of a classic film makes you realize how much some things have changed in the world, and maybe for the better. October 21st, Hokkaido's Director's Cut. Hokkaido encapsulates everything great about 90s tokusatsu with its dark, gothic themes, while also reinterpreting a classic story in a new, exciting way. October 23rd, 1931's Frankenstein. The monster movie to inspire all other monster movies is still a classic that holds up 90 years later. October 24th, The Bride of Frankenstein. While the titular character may not be in it much, the story that gets there does not retread too much ground of the previous film, but creates probably one of the greatest sequels ever made. Also that same day, 1910's Frankenstein short film. If you want to know what it's like to have an out-of-body experience with a silent film, I have one right there for you. October 30th, Hocus Pocus. A film that does not get enough love and attention for how dark and yet how delightful the overall final product is. Also that same day, 1953's House of Wax. Vincent Price will scare me no matter what role he's playing, but in this context, he's truly terrifying. October 31st, Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. Possibly the first cinematic crossover in history, and what culminates storytelling from multiple films into sort of a mess. Also that same day, House of Frankenstein. Again, kind of a mess. Surprising it even came together. Also that same day, House of Dracula. I don't want to talk about House of Dracula. November 1st, Kamen Rider 01 Others, Vulcan and Valkyrie. A poignant final note on the 01 saga that leaves me feeling bittersweet, yet also oddly satisfied. November 5th, Eternals. The MCU's first strategy is not hitting everyone the same, and for me, I'm not sure how to feel about it. November 6th, Dune, Part 1. A really fantastic, grand, epic adaptation of the novel. I cannot wait for Part 2. November 7th, Finch. A Tom Hanks film that will make you cry, it'll make you sad, but you'll also be kind of impressed by its storytelling nature. November 12th was a rewatch of Shang-Chi on Disney Plus because I can't get enough of that movie. November 15th, Kira Major vs. Ryu Soldier. A crossover film that somehow does disservice to both teams, and I'm not really sure who's to blame. November 17th, Tetsujin 28 the movie. A live-action adaptation of an anime that is somehow more successful than any other high-budget thing from Netflix. November 21st, Ghostbusters Afterlife. A true fourth Ghostbusters story to the original films that considers everything that came before it in a wonderful, loving tribute. November 26th, Red Notice. Red Notice is what happens when you get a bunch of high-profile actors and throw them in a movie together. There's also a weird twist at the end. That was technically 2 sentences, but I'm going to go with it. Also November 26th, Star Trek Generations. A film that should be rewatched by many who did not like it initially. There is some really poignant storytelling that is muddled by a lot of weird production stuff and kind of a strange ending. November 28th, Lupin III, Dragon of Doom. Goemon takes the spotlight in a film that has actually got a lot of twists, turns, and intrigue, more so than the average Lupin special. December 5th, Spider-Man. This classic film is marred by some outdated character tactics. Spider-Man 2.1. The extended cut of an already great film is helped by its main villain and its lack of focus on its weird love triangle. December 7th, Kaizoku Sentai Ten Gokaiger. A film that somehow brings more story, life, and character to the world of Gokaiger than the series could ever provide. Also December 7th, Spider-Man 3 The Editor's Cut. The biggest problem with this movie is not Venom shoved in at the last minute, it's the love triangle. It destroys pretty much everything this movie had going for it. December 8th, The Amazing Spider-Man. A film that makes its own path with its own Peter Parker and its own new world is actually more engaging and more interesting to me than the films that came prior. December 9th, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. A film that is overstuffed with setup for things that'll never happen, but what it does do well, it does incredibly well. December 12th, Spider-Man Homecoming. A film that makes the Vulture terrifying, makes Spider-Man a friendly neighborhood hero, and overall is a fun high school adventure before so much happens in the MCU after. Venom is a film sort of made out of time, but in the best way possible. Its classic cinema feel is perfectly welcome in the modern age. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is a film that understands what the character of Spider-Man means to so many people and gives everyone a chance to put on the mask. Who Framed Roger Rabbit in 4K. A film made at a time when the two biggest studios were willing to put aside their differences in order to make what is probably the most impressive animation live-action hybrid ever put to film. Spider-Man Far From Home. A movie that pushes Peter Parker to the brink of his limit as Spider-Man while also introducing the most destructive villain in the MCU. December 15th, Batman Returns. A beautiful comic book film in every sense of the word. It makes for a perfect Christmas spectacular. December 18th was the start of Matrix Week. Now this was an event I did at home where we cataloged through all of the Matrix films and Animatrix shorts as well as the video game cutscenes to get ready for Matrix Resurrections. So this next section, I'm just gonna roll through the Matrix stuff and then we'll backtrack over a couple other things we had here. December 18th, Animatrix, The Second Renaissance. This is the backstory for The Matrix, an essential viewing for anyone who's a fan of the films. Animatrix Detective Story, a short film that sort of sets up the original Matrix film while giving more to the storyline of Trinity being a famous hacker. The Matrix, a classic, groundbreaking film in cinematic history that inspired not only filmmakers, but cyberpunk nerds for generations to come. December 20th, Animatrix, A Kid's Story. Giving more relevance to a character who appears briefly and has a pivotal moment in later films, A Kid's Story is a very beautifully done animated short. Animatrix, Final Flight of the Osiris. This film is another quintessential part of the Matrix narrative, telling the story of the ill-fated Osiris. The Matrix Reloaded. A film that manages to capture the essence of the original while setting up elements for the future. It expands the Matrix universe into very interesting territories. Animatrix Program. A short that brings up an interesting idea of what programs mean and if they have sentience. Animatrix World Record. Could a physical force and sheer determination break someone free of the Matrix's control? Animatrix Beyond. What is beyond the Matrix? December 21st, Animatrix Matriculated. Setting up the concept of humans working with machines, what does it truly mean to be alive? The Matrix Revolutions. The conclusion to the Matrix trilogy is overstuffed with action, and with some slight editing would be a better film, but still the weakest in the series. And then lastly, to close out Matrix Week, The Matrix Resurrections. Less of a sequel and more of an epilogue to the story, this provides a different ending for those unsatisfied by the one in Revolutions. So now we're going to backtrack a little bit, because I did watch a couple movies in between Matrix Week. The first one being Ron's Gone Wrong, an animated film that reminds me a lot of Metabots, but has kind of a more depressing ending. And then also Spider-Man No Way Home. Need I say more? December 23rd starts kind of a Christmas marathon, so we're going to kind of roll through these and see where we go. The Bishop's Wife, a classic Christmas movie of an angel visiting Earth. December 24th, Jingle All the Way, a film that is overhated by people online, and I will stand at this ground and make my case. It is fun. It is Christmas. It is enjoyable. That was technically 4 sentences, but I had to make my claim. Elf. What has become a Christmas classic is still hilarious in some of the most outrageous ways possible. Scrooged. What might be the darkest Christmas movie ever is absolutely one of my favorites during this season. Year Without a Santa Claus. I'm Mr. Heat Miser, I'm Mr. Sun. December 25th, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. What may not fit the Lampoon series makes a great Christmas classic for many. White Christmas. A film that breaks the realities of what a stage could actually be, but provides some of the most interesting, exciting dance numbers put to screen. A Christmas Story. A Christmas classic about children being miserable at the holidays and just wanting that one single dangerous toy. December 26th, No Time to Die. A fitting conclusion to the Daniel Craig Bond saga. December 27th, Encanto. I still can't get the music out of my head. December 28th, Tick Tick Boom. The movie that has sat with me the longest and will not leave my mind. And then closing out the year, Lupin III, The Legend of the Gold of Babylon. A strangely paced movie that's still enjoyable with all the classic Lupin tropes you'd expect. So that does it for every movie I watched in 2021 Part 2. If you enjoyed this format better than the first one, leave a comment down below and tell me what you think, and also tell me, what I could improve on, what you'd like to see more of. And also, if you have nothing to say but just want to let me know you liked it, hit that like button. It also helps the algorithm for this video to get seen by more people. If you enjoyed me talking about movies, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. Check out the other videos on the channel, because I do have some more, and I do plan on keep talking about movies. The channel is mostly toy focused, but I do like talking about movies. I like talking about Blu-rays and DVDs, and I'm going to keep doing it because it's stuff that I really enjoy. And thank you to everyone that's always been watching, liking, commenting, subscribing, and sharing links on Twitter. You all are wonderful. I really appreciate you. So on that note, check out Hero Club at hero-club.com for movie news and more. My awesome graphic designer on Twitter at darkclaw643. And until next time, this is Soundout saying goodbye.